we transfer how we feel into the other person. And that is something that is so important to realize. So it would be very common to just disregard how they feel because they have joined a different reality. I think that of all the things that I see in terms of communication with a person with dementia, this is the most common, the most avoidable perhaps, and the one with the biggest impact. Welcome everyone to the Dementia Doc podcast. I am Dr. Miguel Rivera and I am joined by my wife Ganga. And today we are going to discuss 3 critical mistakes to avoid in dementia care.
Miguel, before we start, let's just lay the ground that you cared for your dad, and I'm sure you made mistakes. So, what was your experience as a caregiver before we get to the 3 key points?
Well, I think that the first thing that comes to mind is that, in a few occasions, I definitely made things worse by the things that I thought would help. It took some time before I finally realized, maybe this is not the right thing to do. So there are definitely some things that we can learn about that will make our communication with our loved one better and improve the caregiving experience both for the person with dementia and for the caregiver.
And I think by saying that, we also mean if you find that, hey, I made those mistakes, it's not the place for judgment. It's more to educate ourselves and to be more compassionate towards ourselves. And with that, let's move on to the key point number 1, the critical mistake number 1.
So, yes, number 1, do not correct or argue with your loved one with dementia. I think that of all the things that I see in terms of communication with a person with dementia, this is the most common, the most avoidable perhaps, and the one with the biggest impact. Do not correct and do not argue.
Of course, it's easier said than done because we're all humans and our emotions run. But as some sources also define it as do not correct or argue with their reality. And that makes me think of improv that we love, because in improv, the whole basis of improvising is yes ending the reality of your partner in the scene.
Well, yes, actually, yes, and. So, one of the most common mistakes that I see in dementia care is when we try for the person with dementia to join our reality, as opposed to us realizing that we need to join theirs. So, an example would be, your mother with dementia is looking for her parents and is very concerned that she cannot find them. So, I think that one of the common reactions would be to say, "Hey, mom, your parents are dead. They died many years ago, and they're not gonna come." Just basically, trying to get them to realize that there is this departure from reality. However, the person with dementia doesn't remember that. The person with dementia is experiencing the contents of their own mind. So the right thing to do would be to say, "Oh, mom, I am so sorry that you're upset about this. Let me see if I can get a hold of them. I will call them and let you know. In the meantime, why don't we go, do their favorite thing? Have a little bit of ice cream or some yogurt or some cranberry juice." But the idea that you mentioned is critical, which is um, do not bring them into your reality, join their reality.
I have a story when a friend of mine whose mother in law lives in Florida and they live up north. And he said, I got a call that my mother in law was outside waiting for her daughter to arrive while my wife actually never left the house. She wasn't even going. So we were trying to convince her that she's not coming. And I said, it probably would have been better if you yes ended her And you said, yeah, 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 she's coming. She's already at the airport, but it's still a while. So let's go inside and have a cup of tea. And for him, it was like the new sort of information that they never considered. And of course, because it's not easy, it's your loved one who you always saw in a certain frame, light, and now they are departing from your reality, from our mutual reality into their own. But at the same time, it's so much easier on them and ultimately on you too, if we can yes and.
Yes, that is just such an important point. Always to remember to step into their reality and not try to bring them into ours. That is a critical point.
And that brings us to number two. The second critical mistake or thing never to do is to never ignore or dismiss their feelings and emotions.
Yes, very another very common mistake is that the person. I mean, again, if we use the example that the person with dementia is looking for their parents, so it would be very common to just disregard how they feel because they have joined a different reality, and to validate them, to validate how is it that they feel in that moment in time is critical. Acknowledge their feelings, say yes to their reality, do something or say something brief that can comfort them. Like, for example, you use the example of she's at the airport. So, many times when I am involved in situations like this, I will tell them, hey, listen, I just spoke to them. They're caught in traffic. They are on their way. They'll be here in a few minutes. Come on, let's have a cup of tea or some ice cream or whatever. So, to validate, to say yes to their experience, to honor their feelings, and then to redirect is important.
So, in that experience, how would you validate their emotions?
Well, just to say, I am so sorry that you're upset, but listen, I took care of it. Just to not dismiss that and to say, listen, your parents are dead. They're not coming, and hoping that that is going to take care of the crying, or that is going to take care of the upset. On the contrary, taking care of the upset, acknowledging that, validating how they feel is critical. First step is to validate their feelings. Second step, then step into their reality. Third step, redirect. Offer something. And I feel that things to eat are great. Because they could join a music activity or they could watch some TV, but I think that to give them something that they enjoy, something that brings them pleasure, like eating their favorite food, can actually help to redirect their attention completely. So it's definitely one of my favorite things to do is to redirect them by give them something to eat.
But let's still return a little bit more to not ignoring and validating their feelings. Even if you can say, oh, there is nothing to worry about. Come on. Your parents are coming. They just went to work. Like, let's say you just created something that could be comforting. But even the phrase, oh, there's nothing to worry about. Don't you be upset, is not something that validates the person's emotional experience.
Correct. Yes, it's better to say, I am so sorry that you're upset, or I see that you're upset. I see how this situation is making you, feel anxious. Or so yes, I agree with that completely. Just to acknowledge the fact that I can see that this is upsetting you is the way to go.
And I would think that it's important to also acknowledge our own emotions because sometimes that is frustrating and we just want to prove the point and get out of there, especially if it's a family and the family has a family history, it's, close relationship. I would think it's probably easier for people at work because there is a little bit of that professional relationship. But once it's family, we all get triggered, we all have our own responses. So it's just important to even take a moment and acknowledge to yourself, oh, that makes me frustrated. I'm frustrated right now. maybe take a breath or just take a beat, but then acknowledge your family member's emotion and saying, hey, yeah, I see that frustrates you. Or yeah, I see that you're really sad about this. So that they feel seen. Because I think we all can
Hmm.
sense when they're seen versus when the person just sort of like, yeah, yeah, it's all fine. Don't you worry. Or, oh, there is like, don't make a big deal out of this, even if you're trying to step into their reality.
Yes, most important, do not disregard their feelings and emotions. And I think that also what you mentioned about checking in with yourself, being in tune with your own emotional state at the moment. Are you getting frustrated? Are you getting upset? Because, if your loved one is having some kind of a behavior, I always recommend, take a breath, check in with yourself first, then approach your loved one with dementia. You will have much more chances of success in redirecting your loved one if you yourself are in check with your own emotional state. We transfer how we feel into the other person. And that is something that is so important to realize. So when we check in with ourselves, when we take a couple of breaths before we act, when we are in acknowledgement of how we feel inside, we can make a bigger impact in a positive way with our loved one with dementia.
And again, be self compassionate. Don't judge yourself for having emotions. It's not an easy task to care for someone with dementia. And we're all humans, we all have those experiences. The more we can be self compassionate, the better we can offer that compassion to the other person.
Let me interrupt 1 second because, that really brought back so many memories of me taking care of my dad and getting to the point in which I was like angry. I was definitely experiencing anger. And what frequently happened is that after that anger came, then shame came. And then that just made things so much worse because not only had I gotten angry with my dad, then I was feeling shameful for being angry. So when you talk about self compassion, it is such an important point to realize that this is a difficult job, that we are going to go through experiences like frustration and anger, and to do what we can to truly acknowledge those emotions and hopefully have ways in which we can mitigate them or deal with them, and maybe we can make another podcast regarding this. But the idea of not punishing yourself, of not getting down on yourself because you've experienced one of these negative emotions, or well, we call them negative emotions, but let's say of different vibration emotions like anger is really important.
Yeah, we absolutely will make a whole podcast. I think just speaking of experiencing anger is a good topic to discuss because there are a lot of nuances and healthier ways to approach that. But for
Yes,
now,
I agree.
let's move on to number three. What is the critical mistake number three?
So, critical mistake number three is using infantilizing or degrading language.
Miguel, and why is this so? And this one, I think, could be confusing for some people, especially I'm not from US, but knowing that people in the North speak a little bit differently from in the
Hmm.
South. For example, when we were reading about this, the recommendation was don't use the word sweetie. Sweetie would be infantilizing language towards a grown up
Mm.
person and would not be respectful. But also living in Florida, I think there's a lot of people who could call me sweetie and not as a child, but just something that they use. So, how
Yeah.
do you look at this recommendation?
Well, it's a little bit of a gray zone, right? Between using, let's say, endearing words, which is, I think, what you just explained about when somebody calls you sweetie, to using sweetie in a manner that infantilizes the person. Like we don't want to use baby talk, like, "Oh, what happened? You pooped your pants? Come on, let's go to the bathroom and I'll clean you up," or "Oh, you're such a good boy," like that. That is degrading. It goes against a sense of dignity, for the patient. It is not respectful. So no matter how advanced the dementia is, we should always address the person with dementia with the respect that they deserve as a human being. And I think, a lot of times I see this mostly in facilities, or perhaps when people are at home with professional caregivers. I think that in general, the family members tend to maintain similar language that as they used before the dementia onset. But it is most important to be aware of the language that we use because, for example, I had a patient that hated being called sweetie. He was a doctor and he insisted on being called doctor. He always wanted to be told everything that was going to be done to him before it happened. And he really recoiled in serious anger when he thought that people were not taking him seriously. And he was already in a memory unit, with at least a moderate type of dementia, but he responded very poorly to baby talk.
When I listen you describe this, what comes through that if someone addresses me in this way, I would also feel a bit, come on, I'm a human being, I'm a grown up. So it's probably a good check in if whatever I'm saying, someone told me would not land well, then don't use that language with the person you're assisting with care. Just because you're assisting them, they still can choose the shirt that they want to wear, or maybe they can choose if they want to eat a soup or potatoes today, or whatever it is that you're having, versus, oh, come on, open your mouth and let's have that spoonful for your mom type of a talk.
Yeah, I think that is an important choice that you bring regarding choices. So another way in which we degrade somebody with dementia is by taking choices away or giving too many choices. So it is important for them to have an input into what they wear, into the food that they eat. I wouldn't take out 3 or 4 shirts. I would bring out 2 shirts and say, "Do you want to wear the yellow one or the black one?" But still give them the idea or give them the benefit of casting a choice. Even if they may look funny or whatever, it is important for the person with dementia to still feel like they are the decision makers. And to take away, it goes directly against the dignity of the patient. So I think it is most important to salvage and give the opportunity for choice for as long as possible.
And we can give in the description below some of the language to use and not to use. But maybe you who are listening or watching us on YouTube, if you have examples of something that you found worked or did not work, please share in the comments because the more we all have different experiences, and the more we can share, the easier that path can be for all of us.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely don't have all the answers, and we would definitely welcome your input. That way, we can learn from each other, which is how we do the things the best way.
And with that, we'll see and talk to you in the next episode. And thank you for watching.
Thank you for joining us.